the ASL interpreter. Now let me find the slides.
Kicked you out?
Yeah, I kicked you out.
And worst comes to worst, I can turn the laptop around.
And it's not.
Worst comes.
Wait, you're coming.
Ouch!
You're coming. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. So is this your camera right now?
That is my camera.
Okay.
I want to frame up a tiny. Graham's doing
like Baltic right here.
No.
Well, temporary. I mean, if we're
Bring it up and last, like, okay, I know you know that, like, I'll reveal it. We don't, not all of us have to be the same way. Like, I definitely appreciated that part of Portland.
That's what you want.
okay,
But how do I
Yeah.
get the video output?
Tell him to stop doing that. The phone and go.
All right. So, are you in as participant or?
I just muted because we were talking.
I'm not hearing anything.
All right, we have to get started. We
just have to
we're
go.
just-
Yeah, I just don't think we're gonna.
Keep the sound on. Like, that's fine. Okay.
All right, so are you, you're gonna, as soon as right after the land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome finally to the 2023 Queer Liberation March launch town hall. I'm going to ask everyone, just for the rest of the town hall, you caught me before I was able to say it. Please don't applaud. The service animal over here reacts badly to applause. They're the service animal for one of our panelists. So snapping is okay. Soft snapping, beat hits, beat next. Maybe not even snaps. Just ASL, just ASL applause, please. So I going to turn it over to one of my co-organizers, NYC, to do the land acknowledgement.
Nulantam Ele Power. That's Lenape for Ngajwalki. I'm actually native. I'm Dakota. I'm Cherokee descent. And I'm here to give you the land acknowledgement. Currently, we're sitting in land that was once and still is the land of Lenape, the unceded land of Lenape, Muncie land, specifically, land of Lenape here in Manhattan. We do this on a regular basis when we open our meetings to acknowledge that the history of the land comes with Lenape people. But the Lenape people are still alive. So we're still having the ground, or Lenape people are still around, they're still living, they're still practicing. This morning I had a meeting with people from Canada, 2 nations in Canada and one in Wisconsin, where the Lenape were relocated to. We had a meeting about trying to bring some of the culture back, training this fall. And we're still here, and we're still trying to make things better for our people and for everybody else, including you. One of the things that the chief made the first peace with the white people and Kevin Sutherland, William Penn made the other one. His name was Chief Tomanin. During the 1800s, there was a Tomanin Day on May 1st that everybody in the 13 counties celebrated. Somewhere that fell off, we thought, and there was other people. Anyway, figuring that out for that one was a good idea. But anyway, I want to acknowledge anybody who has Native ancestry or Native descent, both here and online. If anybody hasn't, please raise your hand. We do this every time we find out more and more people of our cousins than we think. And I want to make sure that we understand we're not just history, we're still making it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And so we're going to start out. I'm going to start out. Most of you I know have probably done this entire town hall with just a mass email. But for the folks that I don't know, if you've never come to the Pro-Liberation March, we were founded for a whole lot of reasons, but what we are is we're a political people's march. We are a march for liberation for all of our peoples, for all oppressed peoples, through the LGBTQIA2S communities of New York. When we started with a really large march and a really large rally. In subsequent years, we've also done live streams that can be seen all over the world. We're here tonight because it's exactly 4 months to the day from Pride Sunday here in New York. And we want to get a nice big head start so that we can do as much to make this year, the 5th annual Liberation March, as spectacular as possible. And for that to happen, we need community input, we need community ideas, we need community organizers, we need community volunteers, we need folks to step up and put in the work and put in their ideas. And so that's why we're holding this town hall today. And so I'd like to start off with our first panel, which is, I named it and I can't remember anything. Okay, so it's LGBTQIA2S plus communities under siege. Our moderator is full RPC organizer Skylar Moore. Come on, Skylar. Skylar's also a judicial delegate in New York Assembly District 36. And then Cher Avery, who is right here from New Pride Agenda. And Oliver H., who is a performer with Drag Story Hour at NYC. We also were supposed to have Tanya Johnson Walker from Equality New York. Unfortunately, Tanya has food poisoning and could not make it today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Skylar to get this conversation started.
Yeah, so hi, nice to meet you all. I've never met you. Love your makeup, by the way. And hello to everyone who came in person, and hi to everyone who's tuning in at home. Hi, my name's Skylar. Of course, Jay has introduced me. So our community is under attack. It is under attack every single day. From, in Montana, there's a bill right now that will legalize bullying in schools. So with the broad spectrum of everything that's going on, what do you think is what the main need is for our community at the moment? Not just singling out an issue as a community. What's the common ground? What's the need that we need to focus on so we can really fight that?
Well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Oliver H. My pronouns are they, he, and z. And I'm here from Drag Story Hour NYC. Thank you guys for having us. Personally, I believe that community is what we in general need right now. I have been shown time and time again that things that keep us safe, things that keep us moving in the work that we do is being surrounded with community and strengthening our own community bonds through mutual aid, through conversations, and knowing that we can rely on each other as a community when we face outside threats.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Hi everyone. I'm Cher Avery. Oh my god, I'm slipping through the cracks. No. Wow. I've slipped through many cracks in my lifetime. That wasn't one of them. I just want to start off by thanking you all for welcoming me into this space with my rambunctious pup who is well-trained, well-misbehaved, and still has some training left to do, but sometimes we wake up and some days are harder than others, and in order for me to be here today, I needed her with me. So thank you for welcoming me into the space and meeting my needs. I think in response to this question, what we need as a community is collective momentum. Too often moments come like 2020, moments come like March for Our Lives, moments come like the Stonewall Uprising. And my question as a young person, as a young organizer, as someone who's been in movement work since the age of 13, if you ask my mom, she'll say it's since I was in the second grade, but I say since the age of 13, is sustained momentum. Where are the protests? Where are the rallies? Every time a trans woman is murdered, why are there not thousands of people in the street like we had in 2020? Right? There is such a lack of media attention on the atrocities that we face. Even the media attention that we do get is lackluster and doesn't keep the spotlight on our issues for so long. And what I'm trying to do as an organizer and my role at New Pride Agenda is to keep the momentum sustained. What we really need to do is have organizing strategies and tactics that meet our oppressors head on and to keep that energy going so that there is no room for them to introduce a new bill, so that there is no room for the Department of Corrections even to get the LGBTQ affairs unit, so that there is no room for them to think, well, marriage equality is done, we've washed our hands, we've went home and everything's hunky-dory. That's the problem. They think that now marriage equality is done, everything is done. And what we need as a community and as a movement is to be numerous and to say, no, there's still so much more work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of you said exactly what's on my mind, and I'm sure all of us here tonight and online. I do also want to focus on Drag Time Story Hour,
Sorry, screwed up.
Drag Queen Story Hour.
We'll do that.
I
We'll
know
do
you're with the drag story. Queens. I've seen you guys show up at or New York public libraries. Essentially, right, these hate groups are coming in to dehumanize us. Again, they're using outdated terminology such as like groomer, groomers, pedophiles, that sort of thing. So I would just like to give like a moment so you can share what the experience is like being on the front lines.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to say the least. I'm from Drag Story Hour NYC, and in general, just so y'all know, I'm a drag king, which means that my character is a king. My character is of coming from masculine roots, and we as a organization have been moving to remove the word queen from our name as an organization because we offer so many different types of drag and so many different types of storytellers. So we like to say Drag Story Hour in general. We have kings, we have queens, we have all different types of royalty. Drag is not binary and it never has been. So that is something big that we've been trying to push within our own organization. But it's when we're kind of met with a lot of this hate externally, it feels very front lines. I have had so far 3 of my personal readings that were protested. One of the largest ones being the one in Jackson Heights in, I believe, the end of December, where there was Proud Boys and Nazis. And it's been terrifying, but also just a real reminder of how important the work that we're doing is. And it is terrifying. I kind of, I come from a educational background. So like I was a daycare teacher for a long time. And in all of these spaces, some of the first things I'm thinking are, how can I keep the children in front of me safe in any worst case scenario that may happen? And they have just been reminders to me of how resilient we are as people and how important it is to work with them. Like we've been surrounded by people screaming all these terrible things, and the energy that emits from these children that are just coming to read stories and have a good time has really kept me grounded a lot in these moments, because sometimes it's hard for me to hear all of the negativity in the background from their laughter, from their joy. On the day of Jackson Heights, when there was so much hatred going around us, there was a child there who told me I should add more glitter to my makeup. And I was like, you know what, that is the least I can do for you. You got it. But to have them focus on more of the fun things, the artful aspects of this, and for me, I use drag as an expression of my emotions, as a way as art therapy, as a way to safely express my own trauma, and to be able to kind of see it in the moment with these children has been just a really solid reminder. And when I'm hearing these people say such hateful things outside, I can't help but think maybe they needed someone to read them a story, moment, and tell them what kind of there are to exist as people, to exist as humans, and how diverse and beautiful these experiences may be, and what kind of types to exist and be. How all of these boxes that we're kind of forced into are lined with barbed wire. So really just being able to show children, show adults, show people how we can exist in artful ways, we can exist in beautiful ways. We can paint swirls on our faces because it makes us happy. And it's really just reinforced, especially because that is what we are first. We're a literacy program. It's just, we are there, especially showing, I think one of the most important things of doing Story Hour is being able to be a trans person, to be a drag artist, and to humanize myself within these moments and talk to them, because often, especially as trans people, we're seen as just a news story, as just a political topic, instead of just people who are going in to do their jobs, people who have families, people who are daycare teachers, people who I'm a baby to two wonderful children, and to be able to nurture these kind of storytelling relationships and be the queer elders that so many of us lost. We lost so many queer elders, and especially trans elders. So to be able to be that for this kind of newer generation against this, it feels so front lines. It feels very much like really front lines of the culture wars. And it's terrifying and really similar, like you were saying, it makes me feel like we have to push this momentum, like we have to ride these terrifying situations, because it will, I think for me, putting myself in these situations will pave a safer and healthier path for those ahead of me. So yeah, just kind of lights a fire under my butt a little bit. But thank you for holding space for us to talk about this, because it's been traumatizing and scary and relentless. But being in spaces with community and being able to talk about the effects that this has had, and how this isn't anything new, especially for our communities, and just being able to push back and take our voice back is very important. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for being here. And I love how you said, we've been here. This is nothing new. We've been here. We've been here in the 70s. We were here in the 60s. We were here in the 80s. We were here in the 90s, the 2000s. It's the same stuff, just different people, different names. Some cases, same people, same names. But let's go ahead and start talking about the trans healthcare and healthcare in general. Right, with PrEP access is being destroyed because a judge in Texas overruled it and said that it was promoting homosexual behavior is the reason why now health insurance companies can discriminate against people getting PrEP, right? So let's go ahead and start talking. If you guys don't mind, just talk about healthcare as in forms of any type of discrimination with the trans healthcare. Right now, I know there's states like Florida, Texas, right, deep south, but even in some blue states that are endorsing ban on trans healthcare. Dominantly in children, but now they are starting to move into adults. So, do you, both of you have any words of inspiration for possibility of a parent in Texas who has a trans child who wants to wholeheartedly supports their child, wants them to fully transition to be exactly who they are, but the law tells them that they cannot do it?
Well, I think one thing is clear and certain, which is our lives are under attack all across this country. Still currently, to this day, we do not have federal non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ plus IA and Two-Spirit Americans. We were gaining momentum until the aftermath of Roe v. Wade. And again, white cis gays do what white cis gays do. And the Respect for Marriage Act passed. And the Equality Act was put on the back burner. And here again, those within our very community who are disproportionately marginalized, oppressed, discriminated against, and criminalized are left behind. Nothing has changed since 2015. If anything, the conditions impacting trans people across this country, non-binary people across this country, intersex people across this country, specifically those of us who are Black, Indigenous, or fall within the realm of POC, we have been left behind again, and this is the reality. This is the consequence. We have 30 states pursuing anti-trans legislation. I believe if we haven't already surpassed the more than 300 anti-LGBTQ bills, most of which were anti-trans last year, we are coming very, very close to it. And this should alarm all of us, including the white cis gays. Especially when this movement began by the very people whose lives are most under attack right now. I think in terms of hope, as a young person, oftentimes I'm asked, what sustains me, what gets me through? And I think it's an everlasting sense of hope that I don't know quite honestly where it comes from, other than the legacy that have been passed down to me by my ancestors of resiliency, grit, of determination, of a will to persevere and to be free. I am not one to say that we need to get up, move, and leave the communities in which we were born in. I do not think that's realistic for everyone, especially poor, working class folks of color. I think that there is much work to be done in local communities to fight back, to get folks in the local community involved, to strategize, to plan around safety, to plan what the future of their local communities looks like. Do I think that is safe and a possibility right now? No. Not when we have Lauren Boebert, not when we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, not when we have Donald Trump running for president again. And so that to say, New York is a safe haven. And what we are experiencing right now is a mass arrival of trans youth and their families who are fleeing persecution, who are fleeing discrimination, who are fleeing criminalization in states like Texas, states like Alabama, states like South and North Dakota, states like Florida, states that are creating and passing laws that directly attack our ability to live. Now, what these laws mean on paper, what they translate to us in real time is that our lives don't matter and that they're not worth living for. New York, the home of Stonewall, has always fought back against that narrative. Our lives are worth living for. Our lives are worth fighting for. And again, I'll make a call to action to our white cis gays. Are you as angry as we are? Do you believe that our lives are worth living and fighting for as much as we do? And if that's the case, then we need you out in those streets, fighting just as much as we are. We cannot do this alone. That being said, one of the priority bills that the new Pride agenda will be championing this year, for the record, we are the first statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization to fully democratize the process for determining what we voted for. We asked LGBTQIA plus New Yorkers to vote, to make their voices heard. We hear you, we heard you, and we're moving into action. One of those 4 bills is the Safe Haven for Trans Youth and Families Act. Our agenda was voted on by hundreds of New Yorkers, LGBTQ New Yorkers, most of whom are low income, working class, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And what the Safe Haven for Trans Youth and Families bill will do will ensure that families who move to New York, 1, have resources, 2, will not be persecuted or criminalized. New York State will not work with the police, will not work with other state governments on those cases. So this is hardline policy to protect the lives of trans youth and their families who are massively migrating across the country. When we think about where these safe havens are, California, New York, and yes, sure, there's, little enclaves in Seattle, and there's, some progressive places here and there, but let's be realistic. We are the state that is closest to the South region. The majority of these anti-LGBTQ, the majority of these anti-trans bills are in the southern states, right? For working class, poor families who are fleeing, does it make more economical sense for them to go all the way to California or to go to the state that's most accepting, that's closest to them? It's New York. New York has always been that. Look at our refugee crisis, look at our migrant crisis. New York is the place where people come, and the Safe Haven for Trans Youth and Families Act will ensure that when they get here, they will be safe. They will be protected under law, and it goes hand in hand with expanding the Lorena Bonhas Trans Wellness and Equity Fund, which was a historic win for us last year. For the first time ever, this state made historic investments into the trans community. And with the Safe Haven for Trans Youth and Families Act, it would behoove the state of New York to continue making equitable investments into the Trans Wellness and Equity Fund, so services are readily available, readily equipped, and readily ready to be given to communities wherever they find themselves. Not just for people who are arriving here, but for New Yorkers, queer and trans New Yorkers who have been calling New York home historically. And so I see it as twofold. We need legal protections on the national level. We need protections here in New York State for families and their children when they get here. And we also need equitable investments to make sure that the services and the resources we need are well funded and available to us.
Is mine working? Here you go.
Thank you so much. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd also just like to say, in ways, I'm sure a lot of these parents feel powerless in the face of this, especially like you were saying, like not everyone has the privilege to be able to leave their communities or to come to somewhere safer. So I think some of the most important things you can do for your children, for your loved ones, for your trans people in your life is to ask them how you can support them on a day-to-day level. Because trans healthcare and supporting trans people and youth in general is suicide prevention. And like we are going, unfortunately, that is going to be the crisis that we're facing in light of these discriminatory bills and laws that are being put into place. It's going to be a mental health crisis. And so I think really checking in with the trans people in your life and seeing how you can support them on a day-to-day basis, especially like going above and beyond to use their proper name, to use people's pronouns. It is using someone's appropriate pronouns is a free way to, it's suicide prevention, and reminding, just being seen as a trans youth by the people in your life has such significant effects. Being seen and being able to see an adult say, I see you, I see how they are coming to attack you, and I will protect you, is monumental and is not a privilege that all of us are granted. So just checking in and also being a part of your community, working with mutual aid organizations, donating to mutual aid organizations, because that is also how we keep our community afloat. I've seen it myself within our own communities. I've benefited from myself within our own communities. This kind of mutual aid is what keeps our people fed, what keeps people able to access healthcare in general when they don't have insurance, when they do have insurance, regardless. And just, I think it's a very individualized thing, and even just seeing how you can stand up for and support the people in your lives. But other than that, also just talking about it and having these conversations, because I haven't seen as many people talking about it. There was a bill released, unfortunately, yeah, it's like, what, yeah, like where, like you said, where's the outrage? Why are people not as, and you're right, especially a lot of white cis gay people, because they are a lot of the privilege of existing within the bounds of white supremacy in a way that benefits them. And a lot of us don't have that privilege. We don't have that. So physically putting yourself on the line, physically putting yourself in between trans people in danger, and in general, just having these conversations, talking about this. There was a bill released in Tennessee that made it illegal for male or female impersonators to exist in public. And that has intentionally vague wording to attack trans people, to attack gender nonconforming queer people, to attack drag artists, and to just attack the way we exist. It makes you think of how the laws existed at the height of the Stonewall Uprising, where you had to have at least 3 articles of clothing of your assigned gender. So then it makes you think, how are you going to know who I'm impersonating what? Are they going to enforce genitalia checks? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? Having these conversations is important, because that's how we keep people accountable. And that's how we make people know that this is something that we care about, and this is not something we're going to take sitting down. And in your life that you don't care about us. Death is such a hard conversation, because we don't even receive peace in death. There is the possibility of misgendering or I've heard so many trans people have the fear of, if I can't access healthcare, if I don't feel safe enough to go to my doctor and I don't get checkups or I don't get this, and that leads to more severe consequences, am I going to be buried in something that I would never put on my body? Is my eulogy going to be read with a name that feels like a spit in my face? So getting ahead of this and supporting trans people while we're alive, while we can smell our flowers, is so important, because we don't have this safety in existing as we are. And it's hard because a lot of people take advantage the ability to say, this is who I am and this is how people see me. So that's why trans healthcare is so important. That's why gender affirming care is so monumental for us, because it's finally getting us to where we've seen for ourselves our entire lives. Believe the trans people in your lives, listen to the trans people in your lives, and hold space for us, because we've often had our voices trampled over, talked over, muted. And especially within healthcare, ask your trans friends if they need someone to take them to the doctor. Ask the trans masculine people of your life if they need an escort to the gynecologist, if they need an escort to places where they might not feel safe. And again, if you work in healthcare, making sure that the people within your centers as well are providing gender affirming care, no matter what office you're in, what specialty you're in. Gender affirming healthcare is across all healthcares. And just, again, advocating for the trans people in your life, regardless of what state you're in, is monumental. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jade. We'll start a Q&A with the crowd.
Any questions, comments anyone would like to make? I'm going to say Phil Donahue. Those of you over 50 will know what that means.
Thank you very much for being here. My question is, has COVID-19 been a catalyst for any policies that impact queer people, whether it's negative or positive, that you are aware of?
No, I think we've been left behind even on that front, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, let's take a step back and think about what COVID-19 did to sex workers, right? Like, where was the healthcare there? Sex workers can't stay 6 feet apart from their clients, right? So I think, if anything, sex workers were on the front line and erased in the whole, frontline healthcare worker fields. Like, sex workers were out there making sure that their clients were happy and then couldn't access the same healthcare that they probably needed. And so, honestly, I'm thinking back and I'm like, I don't know what trans inclusive, trans progressive, queer progressive healthcare policy came out of it. I mean, Cecilia Gentili's coin clinic recently opened, but I don't think that was in direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What the city should have done was had targeted outreach to the thousands of homeless LGBTQ youth. I was one of them. Not at the time, but I was one of the thousands of LGBTQ youth who frequent the streets of this city every night. Where was the direct outreach to them? Where was the immediate urgency to get them out of congregate care shelters and into permanent, stable housing? I think in almost every aspect, our lives are always the last to be thought about. So I would say we've been left behind there too.
Thank you. We're going to talk more about healthcare as it relates to our communities in the next panel. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. I'm thinking, is there anything that you've seen from any government organization that is worth us talking to at all. I'm working a lot with the migrants right now and have been since August. And there has been not a single government organization that hasn't just shown up for a photo op and then handed it off to people. And then even done things like given money to other, I won't name them, but people who will gladly work with government and the police when they need to, and then not when they decide not to. But we've, as mutual aid, been asked to literally wait around the corner and then meet migrants and bring them to places the government won't bring them. So in your knowledge of what we're specifically talking about here, is there any single government organization that's ever shown any light of being able to provide, you know, any hope and support the services that you're discussing?
Well, I can't say much about any particular organization, but what I can say is what I found, is I've kind of had to walk this bureaucratic tape for my whole life. I was a Boys and Girls Club kid. I grew up in nonprofits. I've always kind of had to navigate this. I've always been the little brown kid the rich white people take pictures with. You smile and wave and you don't talk about your politics. So they give us money. And working with, especially because of a lot of the attacks within Story Hour, it's been challenging because we have to navigate a lot of this red tape. We have to follow a lot of protocols. And for me, I can't put any of my political feelings one way or another into it because for me, my biggest concern is keeping children safe. So for me, it's kind of looking at what can these government organizations offer us and how can I use our time with them as a way to benefit everyone involved. So for me, a lot of the time, again, is taking up space, having conversations. A lot of the time I'm interacting with a lot of council members or government people within governmental positions. And a lot of the times I don't even know what's going on within these, especially within, a lot of times it will happen when it's at a protest at a library. So a billion things are going on and people are coming up to me and talking to me, and I'm like, first of all, hello, who are you? Like really trying to, again, a lot of the times we're going to be seen not as people, but as almost like the figurines on a game board, just iconography for movements as opposed to just humans with lives. So I really try to humanize it when I'm working with governmental organizations and really share my own personal stories and how this is affecting me. And I have found that the more I'm talking about this, the more I'm having these direct conversations, I like to think that maybe they'll think about me when a vote comes. Maybe they'll think about this before they make a decision in the beginning. Because for me, I have a lot of mixed feelings and difficult choices to make when I'm in the moment of these things, because I can't even, my personal feelings about cops, my personal feelings about this and that can't be taken into account because I have to put the children first in the moment. I have to make sure that their safety is being centered in this conversation. And that has, for me, I've just been trying to advocate for the children that I work with. And a lot of that is reminding these government officials why they're there, who they're there to protect, and putting a face to that. Reminding again, I like to directly say to them, talking about how can we keep these children safe? What are you doing to keep us as the people in the front line safe? Because they are not going to be put into danger. They're going to have protocols in place to protect them, but we don't have that. So really just, it's been hard because a lot of times I'm not taken seriously, especially as someone who, I'm a trans-masculine person, I'm non-binary, and I'm often treated as a woman in these spaces, and I'm often perceived as a woman in these spaces and not taken seriously and spoken around. So really just kind of trying to be assertive and also trying to communicate. I try to look at what we will need going into this space, how can I communicate that in the moment, and how I can touch base if I didn't feel that was appropriate after the fact. So really just kind of trying my best to work with what's given to me, I guess, because it's hard because none of these are going to be, most of the time, they're not going in there with our safety in their brains. They're going with how can this benefit them in the upcoming elections? How can I get a photo that'll benefit me in the upcoming elections? So I know that they're going to do that, so I might as well communicate in ways that remind them of why we're there, where the conversation should be centering, and how they can use their privilege in those moments to help the movement as a whole.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank you both. And now we're going to go ahead and move over into our health panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Before we do our discussion, what I really appreciate about the talk that we just had is how important it is to center the most marginalized of our communities. It becomes a difficult thing in organizing because folks who have the most marginalized existences, who have the difficulties of financial difficulties, the hardships, the lack of access, it becomes difficult to make sure that their voices are present in organizing spaces and in general organizing spaces like in Pride. For that reason, we created an empowerment initiative a couple of years ago where we consciously bring in folks from the most marginalized groups, Black and brown, transgender, non-conforming folks, just to make sure that those voices are heard. And I'd like to introduce Jennifer Love, who is a part of our empowerment initiative, just to talk a little bit about the work that she's done with Reclaim Pride.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Love Williams, and I'm an entertainer and activist, and I am one of the members of EI, which is Empowerment Initiative. It is to empower, to uplift, and help you come into the work that you do. And in this time of me being here, I've been able to put on some amazing events, low cost or high efficient. I've been able to put on a Juneteenth panel last year that it's still up, so you can go to our YouTube pages, am I correct? And still view it. Last September, I was able to put on my first live event, and it was a fundraiser called the Night of Love. They're going to sexy edition, so you will see another one of those coming up very soon. In November, I was able to start off Trans Remembrance Week with a trans panel. As a matter of fact, at the end of March, I will be kicking off Trans Visibility Week with another amazing panel. In this time, it will be no trans women other than myself. I want to highlight our trans masculine and our trans non-binary and trans non-conforming. So please tune in. If you cannot tune in that Sunday, you can always go back to our YouTube channels and watch. And definitely understand that Black trans lives definitely matter. I'm 46. The average life of a trans woman is 35.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now we're going to go ahead and get started with our second panel, which is community health needs in a post-pandemic America. So I'd like to invite Ivy Kwan Arce and Jason Rosenberg up to the stage. This is going to be more of a conversation between the two of them. They've both been active and ACT UP for ages. And Ivy works with the Treatment Action Group. Jason is currently employed with the AVAX project. And so I'm going to make sure their mics are on. And I'll say take it away.
All right, how's everyone doing? Great. I just want to extend a big thank you to our last panel, and their thoughts and perspective and experiences. So thank you. And yeah, I also want to ground us in our space. I know Janice, grounded us in Lenape land. I want to also ground us that we are in the building where ACT UP, first started in 1987. So, we're here amongst, folks that have been here. Anne has facilitated here so many years ago. And yeah, so I just want to ground us in that. And obviously, where Career Liberation March happened as well. So I just want to say that first. But yeah, basically, Career Liberation March started about 5 years ago. And, when COVID-19 hit, everyone's lives, it obviously disproportionately affected our career community. And at ACT UP, we thought about how do we meet this moment. There's a lot of mutual aid happening, but not enough action. So Ivy and I and a few others, and especially it's been the brainchild of Ivy, said, why don't we have a community health fair that directly impacts our community? And that's kind of what we thought about for the first health fair. And when MPOX also hit our community, that is what we thought about. How do we meet the moment once again? And unfortunately, we have to think about prevention. We have to think about all of the obstacles that we face, especially as queer people. And yeah, but we, time and time again, so we think about what is healthcare? Housing is healthcare. Food and nourishment is healthcare. Harm reduction is healthcare. And of course, trans-affirming healthcare is life-saving healthcare. So I'm going to kick it off to Ivy, who is going to kind of give a little bit of a background of how the health fair started. I gave a little bit, like a little teaser. But again, a little bit of the history, kind of what we did last year and what we're looking for moving forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Ivy. I go by she, her, Aya, her. So I'm here because of the work that many people in this room have done. I'm part of the relay team. I've been positive for 33 years. And as a straight person, ACT UP was instrumental in my possibility to even be here. There's people like Anne that are here today. So I'm part of that team. I'm looking for the team for the next, for the immediate present and the future to take on this. So a little background about how the health fair started is that it started with a lot of arguments about participating at Pride. And we immediately fell into, oh, we're gonna sell t-shirt. And I'm like, no, we're not. The t-shirt, like selling anything. This is when the city was just starting vaccination. So we went at it. So we did not have conversations with the city about what they should be doing. We asked them to be there. Brandon, who's not here, also from ACT UP, had the brilliance to say, not only we want it for Pride in New York City, Pride is the entire month. So we want you to be in Queens, we want you to be in Brooklyn, we want you to be in the entire month. The city was not ready, we got them ready. And they were very enthusiastic because the city just had not had the capability to see the need of that. So that first year, that's what we did. And at that point, there was a uptick of people basically started converting because we couldn't get into, like everybody else, but there was a shortage of healthcare for everybody. So that was our mission to do that. And what we did is we went back to community that grew up out of ACT UP, which is different organizations like Housing Work that deal with homelessness and shelter, youth. We went back to Calvin Lord and asked them to be there. The first year I was not able to get Aperture to be there, and that was really important for me. That's an Asian Pacific Islander Coalition on HIV and AIDS. They have a clinic. And I was so angry because that first year having Asian Pacific Islanders at the fair was so important while we were being blamed for COVID. So the next year we succeeded, but it took that kind of work within community. And very quickly with Calvin Lord, we did, make sure that they would have their roster of all the service they do, which includes all the LGBTQ, and mental health. So that's how we ended up here. And then of course the second year we had monkeypox. Exactly, the outbreak was happening the week before Pride, and we engaged the city leadership in the health department. They did not have the vaccine, but they literally printed the information. The prints were still wet when they arrived at the health fair. So again, we want to work with more people. So because my goal is to have this relay team to take care of each other.
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna bring up too now is, and that we could explore, is kind of the threats to our community and our spaces. We talked about MPOX. When we first were thinking about the second health fair, we didn't have vaccines, we didn't have treatment, we didn't have enough testing. And as Ivy mentioned, all we had was a QR code from the city. So, how much has changed in a year? What has failed, and what we could do better. We're thinking about, Pride is happening. That can include, an uptick in infection rates, et cetera. So what can we do to, ensure that we have our spaces for vaccines, for treatment, for testing. And that's kind of what this space was and always was meant to be, is how can we take care of our community? How do we keep each other safe? And we're thinking about that now, with a lot of the unexplored territory of our spaces at bars and our peer bars. There's a lot of ambiguity as, what exactly is happening in our spaces, and we're thinking about safety. So, last year we introduced a lot of harm reduction organizations. We gave out 300 Narcan kits. We gave out 200 fentanyl strips. And when we think of that, those are preventable overdoses that could have happened as a result. So, Ivy, maybe you could explore, the need for harm reduction at the community health fair. That was something kind of we touched upon last year, and what we could maybe even, enhance next year.
Well, coming here tonight basically is also the goal is to have more people volunteer, because we have to open doors and the connections to the people that we can get the resources to do it. So we're not in conversation. So whatever we need, the legacy of ACT UP through TAG has opened their basically Rolodex, if you know what that means, that context, to make things happen. So we're not in conversation, we just basically model our needs, and that 30, 40 years of activism on the ground has created those relationships, and we're tapping back into those relationships, because every service that's HIV related and now COVID has traces to our work here. So that is why we want people to have this experience, to work with government and execute what we need, not just for the fair, but the rest of the year, whatever our needs are.
Yeah, we could kind of wrap it up. And if there's any questions.
Any questions, comments, concerns anyone wants to bring up? Sure.
I may have missed this, and I know that you were talking about different queer spaces earlier on, and I appreciate that you were talking about ways that you were reaching out to some of those spaces concerning the post-pandemic world. And if you said it, I'm sorry if I drifted off and I didn't hear it, but were there any results, or had you reached out to different queer spaces about what they could be doing to up the ante on protection in these queer spaces? And if you had, what were some of the results?
Well, the first year was really difficult. I think, people were just coming out, and also what we felt was a barrier is the community didn't show up for us, because there was the moment that could go to Pride, all of a sudden it was like, we're gonna go to Pride. We don't have resources, we don't have a second tier. And that was really, really hard for me personally to hear that. The second year was better, because Jason had to engage with them a lot earlier, and so that was hard. I think when we talk about community coming up for ourselves is perhaps more important than government coming for us. And that's my personal story, right? The community is the one that made that possibility for me, not government. So we never should forget that.
Yeah, and I think that's this healthcare was birthed out of failures of the city not really meeting the community where we're at. We saw that vaccines weren't prioritizing people living with HIV. We saw that MPOX wasn't prioritizing folks living with HIV and sex workers, for instance. So we wanted to ensure a space that was lacking in our community. And, that's what this was kind of birthed out of. And the first idea was like, we need vaccine trucks. That was like our main thing. And if we didn't have vaccines, then we were, failing our community. And now it's kind of grown each year. We have a really great and fruitful partnership with, the Corner Church and Judson Memorial Church. We have Treatment Action Group there, who's really our fiscal sponsor for this now. APACHA, African Services Committee, Metro Plus Health, the REACH program, Housing Works, and we're always looking for more support and opportunities, and that's kind of our call to action here and to you is to see what's missing from our healthcare fair, and what can we do better. And obviously, one of the main things as Ivy mentioned is people power. If we had 10, 15 more people, we could fill up the whole street instead of half of it. And we also want to make sure it's a good time for people. It's Pride. So one thing we didn't mention is also we have a DJ, and we want to see how can we make sure that our spaces are also filled with joy. So yeah.
The one thing I wanted to say is like the health fair. Our goal also is that when we invite like Karen Lord, is that we want to invite not just their staff, but actually the doctors are there, because we want the community to be able to make that one connection, right? That connection, like personal connection. This is what we love about the city is that our people power, right? That we can be in that same space and make that connection, and you don't have to like feel the isolation that so many people have to live, and that's why each of these opportunities are important to us, because we're connecting that history. Jetson Hall, for example, was the only place we could do memorials for people dying of AIDS in the early part of the epidemic in the 80s. So we're re-engaging that history because that's important, that connection. And now we also have, that relay is not my relay as well. People that are working at Calvin Lord are people that grew out of this movement as well. So we are reconnecting the new generations with those people that can give you access to that healthcare that you need.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? Hey.
I had two, I hope quick ones. One is the city has plenty of money. I think we all know that. We probably all in this room know what the NYPD budget is. And we're hearing a lot of the migrant situation, that the hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent, but no, like follow the money, like where is that going? Because it's ridiculous that we're not able to solve the problems with that. So one question was, you're talking about, the city hasn't been there, which is not a surprise, but has anyone kind of followed the money? Because I'm sure they would say they're allocating like a ton. And that's something that I feel like as a researcher, I need to do in a lot of things. And then the second thing is, I do a ton of stuff with Judson too, and like, why is it only Judson? What is the pushback? And I haven't reached out to other churches or other types of organizations as well, but have you found it difficult with other, and what else could maybe some of us do for that?
Well, in terms of following the money, I think also we have to realize that when I say that the relay into like our community spaces, like the clinics, we have that relay also in government right now. There's people that have worked in HIV from the early days that are now in places of power. So sometimes it's just like, those meetings that, you just need to be there to shape that direction for them. Judson Hall is because, it's everything. It's the place that Reclaim Pride identified, and for us it's history. But the practicality, you're in Pride, they have bathrooms for you, tons of bathrooms. They're clean. They have air conditioning. There's places for you to drink water, to cool off. What can you say that about most of Pride to be, And all of this is done by community at no cost. This is not like, we're not selling space, for you to sell t-shirts. We're not interested in that. We're interested in that connection. And for you to follow the money is go to community boards, because all leadership has to stop there and get a report. And then it is the same trick, is that personal connection on one-to-one, and then everybody's hearing them say, yeah, come to my office and we'll talk about it. It's no longer you're doing this call alone.
Great. Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ivy. But they have condoms. Well, have condoms in the health
The
care.
city gave us so much condoms.
Okay, good, yeah. Well, we're rising to the skies. We're gonna need.
And young people said, why are we, what's that? There's that conversation.
All right, so, thank you, Jason, thank you, Ivy. So next up, I'm gonna call up, Janice, who gave us the letter of acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting, and introduce Beverly Tillery, the Executive Director of the New York City Anti-Violence Project, and me. We're gonna talk about stuff. But first off, we're gonna test these mics.
Test.
Test.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Can make noise now?
Oh yeah, the dog's gone. If you want to make some noise, you can make some noise.
We're not used to being quiet most of the time.
First off, I want to introduce Beverly being at AVP. We at Queer Liberation March have done a lot of work with AVP over the last couple of years, mostly because the NYPD's SRG keeps attacking us at the tail end of our marches. And AVP's been incredibly valuable to us in the work that they've done. And so, also just so that folks know, Isabel Leva from the NYCLU, New York Civil Liberties Union, was supposed to be here today. Her father fell ill, she was having a medical emergency, and so she wasn't able to come. But the work that's happening in this city around protecting, particularly our activists, but our communities at large, and also our trans folks of color, from police violence is increasingly important. And so I'd just like to throw that off to you and talk about the work that AVP. We're going to talk about a lot of the work that AVP does, not just police violence.
Yeah, for folks who don't know, AVP has been around for about 42 years. It started by folks in the community who are experiencing hate violence and came together because no one else seemed to care, including the police, but also people who are supposed to be providing services and support to survivors in our community. And the organization really started with people starting a hotline out of somebody's apartment and basically saying we need to track the violence that's happening to us because we are the only ones that can bring attention to this, and we're the only ones who can ourselves and each other. And to this day, we really try to honor that beginning. We still run our 24-hour hotline. It's now bilingual. You can text us. I really want to encourage people to contact the hotline. You can also go on our website and report an act of violence if you've witnessed one or if you've experienced one. And the reason that it's so important is because I think over, so many years of experiencing violence, in a lot of ways, we've been seeing this normalization. So even when it comes to police violence, often, I'll be talking to somebody and they'll explain something that's happened to them. And I'll say, did you contact our hotline? And they'll say, no, because it happens all the time. And we know that we can't rely on the data from the police department. We can't rely on others to collect the data that we need. So the hotline is one way, not only for people to come and get support that they need, but it's a really important tool for us to collect the data of what is happening. And one of the things that we have seen over the years is that, we know police violence hasn't gone away. Our community continues to be targeted by police in a number of different ways. The first panel was talking about a lot of the ways that our community is continually criminalized, which leads to more police interaction and more violence than often we even hear about. But yes, just encouraging people to use that hotline to name what is happening to us, because if we don't name it, we can't actually do anything about it. And we know that police violence goes up during Pride season, right? The more we are visible, the more we get attacked. And as you said, those attacks that are happening at the ends or during our marches, when we are active and we were out in the community trying to protest or celebrate, have increased over the past years. And we need to make sure that we are naming what's happening, we're documenting what's happening in a number of different ways, and we're standing up.
Yes, and that's one of the great things that AVP has done is giving folks the avenue to document, particularly in those cases. And if folks aren't aware, the NYCLU, along with numerous activists around the state, I told Isabel, showing our dad, I said, I asked this a lot because I'm working with this group, have been trying for months, for about 5 months, to have a city council hearing to deal specifically with the strategic response group from the NYPD. And twice the hearing has been scheduled by city council, and twice the NYPD has at the last minute said, oh no, we can't come. Something suddenly came up and we can't have anyone from NYPD or SRG show up. When they did this the last time in January, we were so incensed, everyone was so incensed that we had to get a commitment from the city council and the chair of the public safety committee that All right, you've rescheduled this to March 1st. You are having this hearing regardless of whether or not the NYPD shows up. And we had agreements across the board from City Council that this hearing is going to go on regardless of whether or not the NYPD pulls out. So that's March 1st at City Hall. There's going to be a rally from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Folks, please show up. There are also ways that you can sign up. If you've had that interactions with the SRG, or if you're just concerned about the SRG, they're starting to do a sort of mobilization that we're really not 100% sure about going into poor and working class communities of color. We don't know at what level. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. That's a part of what this committee hearing is going to be. Reach out to me or reach out to us and we can fill you in. But they are still signing up people to give testimony. Definitely the people in this room have had serious issues with the SRG. I'm going to turn it over to Janice now because, the title of this one is Organizing for Community Safety. And as was alluded to in one of the earlier panels, housing is safety. Housing is, at the forefront of personal safety, and it's a challenge, for most marginalized among our LGBTQIA2+ communities. So Janice, begin.
Hi, everybody. We've had some great panelists, and I would thank them before I got started. So Beverly was talking about getting numbers and statistics. That's also very important for us when it comes to housing. Under the previous administration with the last guy, HUD didn't cover, under sex, HUD stripped out sexuality and gender identity and gender expression. Since the new administration's in under Biden, those are put back in. Right, so, okay. What do we do with that? There's not a lot of case law history on that with respect to housing. And when you're dealing with housing, especially in New York City, as diverse as it is, you deal with people who have a lot of prejudices and bigotry and problems. There are places to call. One of them for New York City is the Fair Housing Justice Center. You may not be able to lodge a complaint that would cause the difference today, but whoever the bigots are and whoever the discriminating people in housing are going to do it again, right? So when they show a pattern of doing it, then they can be gotten. But we need to step up as a community and make sure that we call and at least put a complaint in, a record in, so that something gets recorded. So fair housing is normally covered. It covers sex, which I said covers sexuality and gender identity and gender expression. We've got very little case law with respect to housing, but we get thrown out of houses on a regular basis. So if we get a landlord that throws us out or that wants to terminate our lease or is at the door yelling slurs at us for whatever reason, we need to report that to people. That's against the law. And that's being enforced now. You go to HUD and put in a complaint. You can do that always, but the better path to do that is to go to fair housing centers, which are across the country. I work at one in Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, which is listed on the bulletin board. We need to be able to secure housing and make sure that we can live there peacefully and have a good place to live. Lots of laws that cover that, but if we're not speaking up and talking about it, then it's not going to get reported. As far as affordable housing goes, it's that much more. Especially in New York City, the availability of affordable housing is pretty small. In most cases, the law covers things unless you've got a building that's got 4 units or less and the landlord lives in one of them. So then it's not covered. Then the law doesn't cover that. But you can get roommates, but when you see an ad for a roommate that says, oh, I want a white guy roommate or a black person roommate or whatever roommate, that's illegal. You can't discriminate based on race, color, religion, kind of thing. The housing becomes important. We need to get the numbers up. We need to get the involvement from the community in doing that. We've got the law supporting us right now. We're trying to put together strategies so that we can actually get the case histories to help support it, even if a new administration comes in and does the stripping out again. We got that through the Trump judges, but we're working on that. Getting the statistics and the numbers is incredibly important. The other thing that some of these places do, like the Fair Housing Justice Center and the Housing Equality Center of Pennsylvania, is we try to redirect people to where they need to go. So if you know homeless trans kids, or if you know homeless LGBT kids, get them to call these organizations, the Fair Housing Centers. We'll get you the information that you need to get to a shelter, potentially permanent housing instead of being in a group housing situation. Those are not the best situations. We've been moving away from those, and I wish we'd move that much faster away from those and getting into places where we get people into permanent housing. But the idea is to call, right? So nobody needs to be left alone. These fair housing centers exist, and they should be able to answer your questions and redirect you to where you need to go.
Janice. And so we talked a little bit, we talked about police violence in our communities, but here in New York, our communities are facing a lot of other violence. Folks are being drugged and attacked in night spaces. We're seeing upticks across the country and certainly in New York State of just random acts of violence targeted at LGBTQIA+ folks. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of overall.
Yeah, I mean, we should not treat this, as folks said earlier, not necessarily new. We've been actually talking about some of these things for many years, but even just more recently, we started to see this uptick of violence really in 2016, right? It was during the presidential election cycle where the language that was being used was clearly targeting our community. And it opened the door for really, all kinds of violence. And that violence has been escalating for those years. And in some cases, it's only really now attention to it. We put out a report in 2017 starting to look at the white supremacist groups that were starting to attack our communities across the country. That was a long time ago, 2017, during Pride season, where we started to see these drugstore area attacks, we started to see other protests. We started to see, armed militia and white supremacist groups protesting our spaces, really trying to shut down our activity, our ability to be in our spaces. So that's one piece of what's happening. You mentioned, the attacks that are happening in bars. We've all been hearing these accounts of folks being drugged and having their money stolen. Mainly we're seeing in and around Hell's Kitchen. But again, we are also seeing folks using Grindr and dating apps and other ways to identify LGBTQ folks, figure out where we're vulnerable and attack us. And we're not really seeing that much of a response from law enforcement, from the community at large, right? As folks were saying earlier, where is the outrage? Even within our community sometimes, this is a time where we all need to be at
alarmed and in the streets and really naming what's happening and demanding some action and attention. And it's also a time for us to be forward and thinking about how to keep ourselves safe. What can we be doing to make sure that we are looking out for each other, that we are our best safety measures, because again, we can only rely on ourselves. So we've been organizing teams of folks going out in Hell's Kitchen, really talking to people about safety, giving people safety tips, talking to the bar owners, the bar staff, making them aware of what's going on, how to be alert, how to pay attention, how to really make sure that we're looking out for each other. And we've also been doing trainings for bar owners and other business folks. More and more businesses and the folks who run our safe spaces are asking for help because those safe spaces are under attack as well. So, you know, we have all of the tools. We don't often have all of the resources. And so, you know, one of the things that we can be doing is educating ourselves, getting ourselves trained. We run an upstander and bystander training for anybody who's interested in just knowing how to, if you see and witness anything that's happening related to hate violence or even intimate partner violence in our community, how you can safely learn how to intervene. There are lots of ways to do that in a way that you can look out for yourself and the person who's being targeted. And, you know, we can do all of these things for ourselves, and also we have to be demanding that resources be given to our communities so that we can continue to scale up all of this work that's happening on the ground. We know a lot of what to do, and we need to be given the tools so that we can build it, so that we can have 10 times the number of people in this room who are trained, who are activated, who are working in a united, concerted way to really be looking at and thinking about safety in our communities.
Yeah. Any questions, any topics that anyone would like to bring up? Oh, I'm sorry, Janice, I'm sorry.
It's very important that we pull together as a community. A lot of times when we talk about resources, we need people. We need people in ACT UP, we need people in Beverly's organization, we need people in mine, in Reclaim Pride, we need people to be involved year round, doing the stuff that makes a difference. It moves by inches forward and goes quicker backwards sometimes. So we need the people to pull together and be a community in order to help us out.
Thank you, Janice, and that's absolutely what we need, and that's why we're here. That's why we hold this town hall every year, to start off the process of getting this march going. Because you know, when we get to December, January, we're down to basically everybody that you see in this room with a Queer Liberation March T-shirt. That's it. That's who we are, right? And over the course of the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to increase that number of people, probably, hopefully, by about 200 people once we get down to our day of the action volunteers. But by about at least about 40 or 50 of just organizers working in multiple areas. So it's vital that we get this kind of community support, community buy-in. So are there any questions on this subject of community safety and community care? Okay.
I can say it loud.
Okay.
The march doesn't work with cops, right, at all.
The march does not. We don't plan with cops. We don't organize with cops. We don't give our information to the NYPD. That being said, the NYPD has a job to do whenever whenever there are 40,000 people marching in the street. What we try to do is keep them as far away from us as possible. And during the marches, we've been extraordinarily successful at that. Unfortunately, they have a tendency to station phalanxes of SRG troops somewhere in the vicinity of whatever our endpoint is. In the last, for 2021, 2022, that was Washington Square Park, and they used pretexts to call those SRG stormtroopers into our space. Yeah, we don't organize with the NYPD at all. And then you had I do it all, folks. I do it all.
I was just wondering for both of you, like, what are some, I work with a lot of youth, I work with a lot of trans youth especially, like, what are some tips we can give them? You shared a little bit about calling the fair housing centers, but they deal with a lot of issues of housing and violence in general. If, in talking to a youth, what are some tips I can give them directly on keeping themselves safe in the streets, keeping themselves safe in accessing housing, or even we work together. I've had a lot of people who we work as a community to raise mutual aid towards housing. I guess if you guys have tips towards keeping our community safe within that.
Thank you.
All right, so part of that is working together as community. So kids that are homeless have been thrown away from their families, or they've run away from their families for a host of reasons. And they're living on the streets, they've got trauma, they normally have medical needs, they need to get to school and finish school. They have a considerable number of needs as their kids. And a lot of the shelter systems are group shelter systems that house them in with other people that identify as their gender, whatever gender they identify as. Somebody's gender variant, they become somebody that housing that a lot of the shelter systems can't deal with very directly. They usually get housing vouchers or can get housing vouchers in order to live on their own. And if they have disability, by the way, HIV is considered a disability under the law. If you have a disability, you can get other certain accommodations that come with reasonable accommodations, reasonable modifications, as needed within housing. But getting the kids off the streets is the first part. So if they're on the streets for any period of time, they wind up in bad situations with respect to sex work or somebody picking them up and using or abusing them in one way or another. We need to get them off the streets, even if it's a group sheltering system. If we can get them off the streets at night, it'll help to protect their lives. If we can get them into shelters and stuff. For years now, I've advocated for the community to step up and start opening the doors to house trans kids that are homeless. If you've got a spare bedroom, you could get qualified to be able to host the child until they turn to an adult, give them a safe place to live, some food, and let them go to school. You don't have to take care of them the rest of their lives necessarily, but you can get them up to where they have a life going forward. That's one of the things I've tried advocating for, but that would be community helping community again. So we need to stand up and start making the shelters. When I started doing housing stuff in the mid-70s, all we could do was find couches for people to sleep, right? Spare bedrooms, right? We did it then. We can do it now, right? If we've got a lot of people coming here from other states because of the laws, and they're coming here without the rest of their families, we need to open our doors. We need to pull together as a community and open our doors. What we did then, we still do it. How many people know somebody who's sleeping on somebody's couch or just spare bedroom for a period of time and then going off to another place that's there, right? We know people. How many people don't know somebody like that? How many people do? Raise your hands. You look around the room and a lot of hands are up. All right, so we know how to do this. We just need to do it. And we need to organize together to do that, in my opinion.
I would also say for youth in particular, we're lucky in New York City in that we have at least a few organizations that specifically work for youth. So you should know those organizations, they should know their emergency numbers, they should know who is there designated to take care of and look after you. We have California, we have Fierce, we have Patrick Martin. We have a number of organizations that you specifically can go to. And those are the places where they're most likely to get the support that they need as fast as they need it. Because the reality is the resources are really limited. And any of us could spend days, going from one place to another to try to get the resources that you deserve. We see clients who go through it all the time. And you're re-traumatized every time you go to the next person or the next agency that's supposed to support you. But you have to tell your story all over again, and often you're getting run around, and often you're given solutions that are not safe. The reality is the shelter system, while of course it's an option, a lot of people don't choose to go to shelters because they're not safe for queer folks, particularly trans and gender non-conforming folks. That's also the reality. And some people we talk to at AVP, they say they'd rather be on the street. So having a way for someone to work with you to do some immediate safety planning, sometimes it's the best that you can do in a horrible situation. And sometimes we're talking to people on the phone who are saying, I'm not going to go to shelter. I know I'm in an unsafe place. I'm going to just try to run the subway tonight, right? And that's their safest option. And I think we need more people in our community that are listening to you, but to all of us, and really, sort of helping folks in those immediate needs, just with safety planning, get through the night sometimes. And then we all need to come together to think about what are the long-term solutions here and how do we demand them. Because it's not okay for our youth to be in these situations. It's not okay for trans folks in our community to not have safe housing options.
And from a policy perspective, at the local level and at the state level, we're going to see an explosion in that need, right? Because we're going to have, as many of us came from some other state to come to New York, we're going to see that number just explode, especially for trans and gender non-conforming kids. And I think you don't need a mic.
I'm made for the online thing, but I'm happy to do it without it. And at the risk of point of personal privilege, I do have a friend, an ACT UP veteran, 79-year-old lesbian, currently riding the subways at night. She is homeless. She needs a place to live. She's just lost the sort of marginal housing she had, and I am looking for any solution for her. She won't go into the shelters. I don't blame her. She's somewhat disabled. She's capable of taking care of herself, and believe me, at 79, she's surviving on the subways now. She is taking care of herself, but it is a day-to-day proposition and very, very scary. And I'm going to look up the fair housing places, but if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. But it's not just the kids.
Really good point. Yes, Janice.
I wanted to clarify one thing. I was not suggesting that we bypass official systems, putting the idea forward. I was suggesting that those systems, instead of being housing, would triage children and put them in appropriate places with rooms and adults for children, or just rooms for adults, right? So I know people that are renting out spare rooms, they have spare rooms available, I don't know what the cost. We could put people in those places from the community and try to save the community that way. So, and your friend, disabled, elderly, low income, qualifies for a number of public aid support events, right? So finding a place for it to live, needs to contact homeless services. Fair Housing Justice Center should be able to tell her where she needs to call. She should be able to get a number of accommodation, number of things to support her in finding accommodation.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and close out the town hall. But before everyone goes, I just want to make sure that folks know that the sheet of paper that we gave you came in. There's a QR code that you can scan on the bottom, or if you're not comfortable with QR codes, you can just go to reclaimpridenyc.org if you're interested in signing up to help organize with us on this year's march and rally and live stream and health fair and all the stuff that we're going to be doing on our website. You can also get to our donation page because there's stuff ain't free. But thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for being part of the work that we're going to do moving forward. You can see, and if you have any questions about what Reclaim Pride is doing, what we're going to be doing, to start setting up meetings, etc., please see any of us wearing these t-shirts. We are all happy to talk to you. Again, thanks for coming out. Happy Black History Month and an early Happy Women's History Month.
Thank you, everybody. Come on, get up. It's Saturday night. Come on. Right? So I want to thank all of you. You're all activists for doing this. Thank you for coming out.
Can all the panelists that are here come on up to the front that are still here? We want to take a quick group photo, and all the organizers, all the RPC organizers and any panelists that are still here, come on up to the front. We're having Donna Aceto, the Dean of LGBTQIA2S plus photography, take our photograph. Skylar, get you out of here.
You took a lot out of me. I'm tired.
Which are you taking? Washington Square. I have like 34 layers. Put myself together again.
I'm gonna hop to the bathroom, but give me a hug. It was so good to meet you.
So good to meet you. Totally, actually.
Totally?